twice a week, someone or the other comes and shares some very interesting and almost always thought-provoking ideas with us. So today it's my special pleasure and privilege to welcome our speaker for today, Professor Sangeeta Kamat. I have known Sangeeta in a capacity as a comrade and a friend and an intellectual interlocutor for many, many years now. I actually forget how long. And she is going to talk to us today about something that she's been thinking about for a long while, but probably begun work in earnest over the last 5 years or so. And her earlier work has been on NGOs, and it's a book, and you know that a book is good when it gets reviewed. You know that it's really good when it provokes someone to say, no, this is not right, or something like that, and then there's a long debate that ensues from there. So her book is actually doing that. This is her first book, which was called Development Hegemonies, NGOs and the State in India. It was published by Oxford University Press. Sangeeta Kamat is Associate Professor in Department of Education Policy at University of Massachusetts in Amherst in the United States. She is also a visiting, she's had visiting positions as reader in University of Delhi, and she did her education at University of Pittsburgh. Her areas of specialization are globalization and education, and comparative and transnational studies in education, and also about NGOs and the third sector. Her two current projects, which I think are useful to bear in mind while we listen to her, are: one is titled Education, Globalization and New Geographies of Power. It is a National Endowment of Humanities Senior Fellowship sponsored project in which she studies the relationship between education reform on the one hand and processes and practices of socio-spatial restructuring that alter social structure, economic relations and cultural formations in new knowledge hubs of the economy. So that's one part of her ongoing research. The other research, which I don't know if that's what you're going to touch upon today as much, is an equally interesting one. It is sponsored by the Obama Singh grant. This was instituted during both Obama and Mr. Singh's tenure, right? One is already out, the other one is on his way out. But she was one of the few recipients of this award, and it's a very interesting award that is about building inclusive universities, linking diversity, equity, and excellence for the 21st century. And part of this is, it's a collaborative project between her university in the United States and Pune University in India. And I'm just going to read that out and I'll open it up for her to come and speak. Indian universities are undergoing a dramatic change in terms of student demography, where greater numbers of marginalized castes, women, and first-generation students are entering public universities in India. And the project that she is heading as a collaborative project with the University of Pune will study the implications of this new demography for academic success and institutional climate, and also have an action-oriented thing, develop programmatic, curricular, and institutional measures that are responsive to the needs of vulnerable student population. Seems like extremely apt, timely, and engaging directly with what we also do as an institution. Please join me in welcoming Professor Sangeeta Kamat.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here and also see a lot of familiar faces that I've really missed seeing for a while. There's some sitting here in the audience. Friends from back there in the US who are now here, so it's really nice to make the connections. And also to see a lot of students here. That's wonderful. This work that I'm going to be presenting on today is really sort of a set of initial kind of thoughts, a certain kind of intervention for discussion that I want to sort of put forward here today. And I really said, okay, this is going to be a friendly audience where I can sort of put some of these proposals out and really sort of try and have like a freewheeling discussion. So I really hope to kind of have, get a good conversation going and sort of leave enough time for questions and answers and comments from all of you. So I'm really glad to really see a lot of you students who really this directly connects with a lot of the work that we're doing in Pune University and my own research. What Murli pointed out, this work that I've been doing, these sort of two different projects that I'm sort of straddling. One, in a sense, really is looking so much at the growth of the private sector, education, and what the impacts have been, both in terms of uneven development, in terms of questions around inequalities and new stratifications, and the movement of capital, and the remaking of our urban spaces. And that research is very much happening in Andhra Pradesh and Hyderabad and high-tech city, which is really, we're standing in the sort of parallel universe, to high-tech city, Hyderabad, and electronic city here in Bangalore. So I'd really be interested also to, be interesting to start see those, the conversations in terms of also the comparisons. And so that's on the private sector, and the collaboration with Pune University is really about looking at what's happening as a result in the public sector of education, right? So it's kind of really two faces of the same socioeconomic processes that are unfolding in two different sides of higher education. And what I'm going to be talking about really today is much more focused on what's happening in the state education sector, the public education sector, where there's really sort of very pressing needs to kind of figure out certain kinds of new ways in which to really think programmatically, policy-wise, as well as pedagogically. Right. And I know a lot of that work has been happening here at Azim Premji University, and that's what really was interesting for me, and interested me to come here and really talk about this work and to share some of this work, because I really would, I think there's a lot of thinking that you all have been doing here as collectives as well that would be very important and useful for us to kind of have, start this off as a certain kind of exchange that we hope will continue forward. Okay, how many of you can't see me there? This. I feel like I can't see you all.
Do you want me to do the slide?
Many PhDs. I want to also thank a few people who helped organize my talk and visit here. And I want to thank Chandan Gowda, who's not here today, unfortunately, who really made all of the arrangements and issued the invitation. So, and Murli, of course, who's really been here as a host. And there's other people that I really owe a debt to who are not in this room today, and actually are not with us anymore. Really helped sort of reshape this work, and because of whom really these projects have evolved and come to the stage that they are at. One of them is a faculty member who was at Pune University, Sharmila Regal. I don't know how many of you probably do know her and heard about her work. And her work was really instrumental in sort of really trying to think about these very questions and to forge this collaborative work between the University of Massachusetts and Pune University. And so you'll see a lot of her work really resonating in here, and I'll be citing from her work. The other person that I owe a big debt to really is a person who was another activist intellectual in Hyderabad, K. Balugopal, civil liberties lawyer, and also really thought very deeply about these questions, not precisely in the higher education sector, but very much engaged with movements and students and youth and issues of caste and so on and so forth, both in terms of the rural-urban kind of divide. And then there are other scholars further back that go further back, and I think those of you who know my previous work on NGOs, for instance, know that I draw a lot from Gramsci and Gramsci's work, and so that's going to be there. Stuart Hall, who have really informed a lot of my thinking. So you'll see a lot of their work sort of really resonate through my paper and my talk today. Okay. This is a quote from the National Knowledge Commission that was there in 2009, that was set up, I think by the Manmohan Singh government, or the UPA, to really, figure out out sort of what do we do about higher education? How do we sort of really leverage higher education sector to be competitive in the global economy? So this is very much sort of takes from the title, or the sort of, the context of my talk is really like the way in which crisis is very much at the forefront in any kind of reference to higher education. Right? And this idea that India's future depends on it. And the other is really, sort of really using Gramsci here as an interlocutor to really say, how do we sort of really sort of locate and theorize this crisis in a way that's sort of not going to be one that's, really going to cause a certain kind of policy paralysis, right? Or in a sense, or really sort of really capitulate to the forces of sort of global capitalism, right? So because this whole thing of sort of, we have to sort of, the only way we can resolve this crisis is that we can get India's higher education sector to be really something that's going to, very seamlessly connect with the global economy or with the international standards and so on. So really I think Gramsci can help us sort of really think about how to approach this crisis in a very different way, and so I'm going to draw upon him quite a bit. It is commonplace to hear about a crisis in higher education from the country's politicians, corporate heads, policy experts, and left academics alike. There is a consensual opposition between the left and the right on interpreting the crisis. For the left, the market is the source of the crisis. For the right, the market is the solution. In this framing, the left appears backward-looking, with no resolution to the crisis. Its default option is restoration of the old, whereas the right appears forward-looking, open to change and new possibilities. Following Gramsci, this may well be the first morbid symptom of a crisis where the old is dying and the new cannot be born. We are in a historical conjuncture in this country, in my estimate, and my work on higher education is an effort to theorize the new conjuncture, to find the openings and opportunities to organize for the future different from the communal, exploitative, and hyper-competitive one we are headed towards. Or rather, I should say, I think we're hurtling towards it now. We are told that the country's future hinges on higher education, that it alone can make good on the country's potential as an emerging economy. And after, it's really sort of ironic also to see this coming from after years of neglect. If you set aside the select islands of the IITs, since for the first 50 years, higher education was really sort of completely sort of neglected, and the whole focus was really on elementary and primary education and universal access to first to fifth grade, right, and getting everything into school. And today, what we see is a scenario really kind of shift where we see higher education is being presented to us as the sector that will decide India's prospects in the global arena. For any student of politics, it is therefore imperative to ask, why higher education? Why now? What this moment suggests is that higher education is a crucial point of articulation in this conjuncture. If this conjuncture is to yield a new organic reality, higher education is the site where the forces of opposition will be diligently working to establish their hegemony. In this contest between the left and the right, the latter and the right clearly has the upper hand. It is more in control of explaining the crisis, how it is to be contained, how to regain equilibrium in the economy, and there are all these sort of big claims that you see often in the media and the press being reported, such as which sort of really verge on sort of sheer polemics, such as preparing workers for the knowledge economy, right? But really, the knowledge economy, one really doesn't know what it comprises, or what is sort of really the labor that's required, or there's no sort of estimate, but it's sort of thrown out there. And these claims really but speak and say something to everyone, to the student aspiring for a good job and to the investor class at home and abroad. And so it creates a certain kind of ideological unity necessary to establish one's dominance. To paraphrase Gramsci, in a crisis, polemics trumps facts. The left's response to the crisis is to roll back neoliberalism, privatization, and the commodification of higher education. Their analysis may be correct, but I think in a very abstract and generalized way. It is a position that is consistent with the global left, because you really see all of these also, whether it's in the US or Europe and Canada, and different cities in the UK, etc. You've really seen these massive student rallies around rising tuition, student debt, unemployment the world over. So you really see this kind of resonate with the position of the Indian left, really resonate with the global left on these accounts. But in many ways, this position is really at many levels removed from the specificities of the Indian context, seemingly oblivious to the changes in higher education in the last 2 decades and their implications for economy and society. As such, the left is unable to make any strategic headway or provide directed leadership, to use Gramsci's phrase, in this situation of crisis. And most worrying is its inability to mobilize an effective response to the assault of the right that appears imminent. And so I want to kind of really, say, okay, what is the specificities of the Indian context, and what is it that we really have to start paying attention to that I feel like the right, in a sense, is not recognizing. What we are experiencing today, I think, is the greatest expansion of higher education in terms of investment, numbers of institutions, and enrollment. And that's the other paradox here, right? So what is named as the period of crisis in Indian higher ed, is also the period of the most intense growth beyond anyone's wildest expectations and projections. Right? And so we really need to kind of see what is the nature of this crisis. It's something different that's going on. And I want to share a few sort of quick statistics here with you, data points, to kind of really give us a sense of what this expansion has been, what it looks like. This expansion and increase, you can see here is just in terms of looking at government, private, and you can see the jump in the private unaided, right? Which in a sense, I guess, APU will count for one of them. This is by, looking at it in terms of, this is the same thing, sorry. You can look at it in terms of, yeah? Oh. Oh, okay. Yeah. I had the slide, did get mixed up. Maybe it'll come up later. So this is, looking at sort of really the percentage jump in terms of the growth of the sector. This is in terms of really enrollments. And here also you see actually it's the upper income levels that have really jumped. From 83 to 2004. This is kind of shared by social group, and I believe on like 2007 statistics, I think we'll see a very different scenario now if you look at 2015. Yeah. So you really see a decline actually in the poorest, right? So people say, oh, there's increased access, or there's Mandal 1 and Mandal 2 really, but it's very, it doesn't really follow in terms of social class. Yes. But this is sharing population and sharing enrollment. So here, what I want to draw your attention to, and this really sort of in terms of today's talk and the points I want to make, is look at the enrollments of the government sector and that how they remain consistently high and that they are serving really the majority of the student population, right, at the undergraduate and the postgraduate level. Here too you can see the shift. Okay, sorry. So let's keep it at. So what, to give you another sense of sort of the expansion, it's really like between 2000 and 2011, that's, a decade. The number of colleges in India increased from 12,806 to 35,539, which really means an average of nearly 6 new colleges a day for more than a decade. So, we kind of know, yes, this sector is exponentially growing, but I think often it sort of really escapes us what the extent of it is. This expansion and increase in access, why is this anyway? Yeah. This expansion and increase in access has resulted in new inequities. It has led to a stratified higher ed system that promises to replicate the deep inequalities that we see in the school education sector. And this is the paradox of our times as well, that democratization or massification of higher education has also made the sector much more unequal. There is one class of students in the private institutions and an entirely different class of students in state colleges and universities. Affluent, middle class, urban educated students are primarily in the private institutions, while Dalit, OBC, and scheduled tribal students, as well as first generation and rural vernacular medium students, are in disproportionately higher numbers in state institutions. And I would say that perhaps Delhi University may be maybe the last remaining exception really to this divide. In state institutions, especially in the social sciences and humanities, you're likely to find the postgraduate and often the undergraduate cohort to comprise entirely of scheduled caste and OBC students, and sometimes maybe a smattering of scheduled tribal students, or often none. And among these, the rural and first generation vernacular medium students are in significant numbers. So what the data shows is that from in 2002-3 data that I have, 84% of total enrollment is in the 3 faculties of arts, sciences, and the humanities, while the remaining 16% is in the professional courses. Enrollment in engineering and technology accounts for only 7.5% of the total enrollment, right? Although that's sort of the rapidly growing sector. What this tells us is that the state institutions where the traditional disciplines of arts, sciences, and humanities are to be found are the ones contributing the most to what has been sort of this new goal, for instance, the new objective of the 12th 5-year plan and the 11th 5-year plan as well that we just finished, of increasing the gross enrollment ratio, right, to match up to those of other economies, other developed economies, other emerging economies such as China. There's this whole push to kind of really increase the gross enrollment ratio. So the target, we were at 11% in like 2002, and the target was that, yes, we will move to about 30% by 2020, right? And we're sort of, I think, getting there. And so what you see is that actually state institutions, given sort of where the concentration of students are, is really the one that's contributing the most to this increase of the gross enrollment ratio. But they are also the ones that are regarded as low status, worse off in terms of infrastructure, funding, and teaching faculty. And so one of the things that, for instance, I often I've been coming across in my research is, the sense of resentment that really state university faculty feel, that here they are the ones who are really serving the national mission in a sense, but they're being treated unfairly, right, as second-class citizens. Right, and the special sort of investment and special treatment is really given to central universities and to autonomous institutions. This demographic shift then is historic, a real departure from the first 50 years of independence. The demographic change reflects changes in the sector that are far beyond the quota prescribed in Mandal 1 and Mandal 2. I don't know how many of you in the room, I think there's probably students in this room who are not born when Mandal 1 happened, right? And you have to go back and look, Google it and look it up. Where students really sort of, there was self-immolation, students sort of set themselves on fire, to protest the Mandal 1 and the reservations, right? And Mandal 2 is something that happened in 2006. So it was 1980s and then 2006. But what we're seeing in this sort of demographic change is really not, is far beyond really what this prescribed quota in higher ed is that the government prescribes. Certainly Mandal 1 and Mandal 2 helped improve access to students from disadvantaged groups, but this is not a case, this demographic shift is not about, oh, they are taking away our seats, right? It can't be sort of misrepresented in that way. Rather what we're seeing is that these are seats that have been vacated by privileged students. In other words, what we're witnessing today is scheduled caste, OBC, and scheduled tribal students entering on the basis of the same qualifications as meritorious, in quotes, students, right? And there's a whole politics to how this also shapes up on university campuses in the admissions process. There's a whole politics to how the stigma of being a quota student is enforced even today. When you have SC or OBC or ST students qualify on the basis of merit, but they will be admitted only under the quota category. They will not be admitted even, the seats will be kept vacant in the general category, what's seen as the open category. But what this demographic shift, really, the kind of comparative analogy that we can make here is really that it's akin to white flight in the US, right? Where in the 1960s, white parents took their kids out of mixed public schools and preferred to send them to all white schools in the suburbs. In India, we're witnessing something similar in higher education. And I think, we're very sadly, sad to say that this is already very well entrenched, this kind of, white flight kind of phenomenon is already well entrenched in the school education system in India. But we're seeing something very similar sort of shape, taking shape in the higher education system. So what you see in terms of this kind of, white flight, or what I would call upper caste and upper class flight, from public institutions into private institutions from the mid-1990s onwards. You really see this kind of movement of students away out of public into the private professional institutions. And where the impact is being most severely felt is really the humanities and social sciences, and to some significant extent also in the pure sciences. How does this division and stratification between the public and the private sector manifest itself? So what one sees is very much, and this is again the left has been bringing up in terms of, the commodification or the commercialization of education, that what you see then is niche markets in education, right? And so you have different kinds of niche markets developing in higher ed, very much, I think that, parallel the niche markets that have developed already in school education, what is seen from primary to high school education, very much in the city, and you see this sort of, replicated all across the country. But in the university system, what we're seeing is that disadvantaged students are concentrated in low-value degree programs in the social sciences and humanities, and in low-value institutions in state colleges and universities. Identities of privilege and stigma continue unchallenged, and public higher education becomes a space of abjection. This is one of the contradictions of liberal democratic social policy, that the success of you had the success of democratic struggles on the one hand, the accommodations of a post-colonial state, rising middle-class aspirations, and the commercialization of education. And all of this has sort of worked together to really widen access and participation, while at the same time deepening the existing inequities and divisions in this sector. And these hierarchies, I think what we also now need to sort of pay attention to is what is the nature of these hierarchies and stratifications. That they do not revolve around a single axis of caste or class, but involve multiple identities of difference, of caste, class, gender, language, zip codes, food habits, that intermingle to form modes of collective existence of collectives. To use, this Bourdieu's phrase, really, saying that this is not about sort of personal or individual identity, but entire sort of modes of existence of collectives really is being shaped, through this kind of difference and stratification. Bourdieu's theoretical constructs of habitus, cultural capital, and symbolic violence that results from social difference and distinctions is very relevant to grasping the complex hierarchies and inequities that we see in public education today. However, his work has yet to find a place in the study of Indian higher education. The public chorus instead is about declining quality in higher ed, and how this hampers our ability to be globally competitive. Right? And you see these very sort of, these kinds of statements, the dumbing down of Indian universities. Right? This is kind of, this is regularly there in the media, whether it's on television news channels or in the print media. And this really kind of, I think, exemplifies the rightist position that has become fairly mainstream today. The left, on the other hand, has not formulated a response to this historic development, except for privately expressed discomfiture and individual efforts to help disadvantaged students succeed. The public campaign of the left remains focused on neoliberalism, privatization, and the commodification of education. These macroeconomic issues, though, don't really connect to the immediate preoccupations and concerns of the majority of students, despite that most of them do come from economically struggling backgrounds. Their more immediate preoccupation is that they're being denied the rewards of the market despite making it to the university. Their concerns are about receiving a useless education in the social sciences and arts, earning degrees that appear to have no value in the current economy. Far from feeling empowered, students express a sense of alienation, insecurity, and shame, discouraged and demoralized as they face a bleak economic future. And I think here again, there's a certain kind of epistemological crisis that is unfolding, right? Because if you look at, so much of, the trajectories, or the political trajectories of many of the students who are entering into these public institutions, really they've been, certainly, where I'm working now in Pune University, they've been very much informed by Ambedkar and Phule, right? Mahatma Phule's writings and, Baba Saheb Ambedkar's writings. But there's always been this kind of straight, a certain kind of assumption of a straight path of, from education to mobility. And what one is seeing now, the students are coming in and they're saying that, okay, this really doesn't hold. The straight path no longer holds. And so there's a certain kind of sense of, there's another crisis of saying, okay, so, what makes sense then? That even in a sense they have to sort of, it's sort of the relevance on, of their own heroes, right? Or their iconic figures like Ambedkar and Phule are sort of called into question. So this may well be the second morbid symptom of crisis, where the old is dying and the new cannot be born. And in the several different kinds of encounters that I've had while doing this research, for instance, there was one that was really, very telling in terms of how the left is sort of really, in a sense, not reading the scenario right, and what the situation or the predicament of the students are. So there was, a left faculty member at Central University, speaking on at a panel on caste and higher education. And one of the things that he said there was, he really lamented sort of, saying, here are all these SC and OBC and ST students, on our campus, but, none of them are sort of really participating in the rallies around, the rallies to stop the privatization of higher education, or to prevent the passing of the foreign universities bill, that was in Parliament, for instance, a year ago, and saying that, it's our universities, our public institutions that really made the space for you, that opened up the space for you, but here you are, you're not fighting for the defense of the public institutions that have sort of given you a space and a home. The private institutions are anyway closed off, but here you're not even sort of, acknowledging, sort of seeing the value of the public and fighting for the restitution of the public. And really the students are, in no way sort of really see it as their fight. For them, that's not their fight, And I think that this is where we really have to sort of figure out how do we, on the left, respond to this crisis, right? In a different way that's really going to sort of bring about a certain kind of new kind of dialogue and then a new bridging of these differences. And here I want to turn to, really sort of try and, bring in sort of, the concluding section of my talk is really to kind of say, okay, what is the way forward and what should be the response of the left? I wish to return here to Gramsci, who explains in excruciating detail in the prison notebooks how every crisis is also a moment of reconstruction, that there is no destruction which is not also reconstruction, that historically nothing is dismantled without also attempting to put something new in its place, that every form of power not only excludes, but produces something. And this is, I think, really dialectical thinking at its best, and this is the way in which I think we really need to approach the discourse around crisis. Here, Gramsci was explaining fascism as constructing a new society in response to the crisis of capitalism in the post-war period. And I think Stuart Hall really has also done similar work in explaining the rise of authoritarian politics and Thatcherism in Britain in the 1980s, which was also a response to economic crisis in the West. But Gramsci was also clear that fascism or a corporate communal compact are not pre-given conclusions, that the reconstruction could go either way. It could be reactionary or progressive, and a lot depends on the directive leadership of the intellectual class. Looked at it this way, the crisis in Indian higher education has within it the conditions for a transformational politics that need to be recognized and theorized anew. Sharmila Rege, and here I really sort of draw inspiration, a lot of inspiration from Sharmila Rege's work, and I think the kind of, her life's work and the work, the legacy that she left at Pune University really speaks to this kind of approach of, looking at it as a moment of, to build something new, really out of, what is seen as otherwise a really dismal situation. Sharmila Reddy makes this observation in her brilliant essay on Phule Ambedkarite feminist pedagogy, in which she proposes that where others see decline and decay and bemoan the loss of civility and standards, we need to see the present educational setting as an opportunity for drawing up a moral imagination beyond the existing configurations of power. It is the demographic change that generates this new context, and here I just sort of quoted her when she talked about the moral imagination, right, beyond existing configurations of power. And really what gives us this opportunity, I think, is the demographic change that generates the new context. And here I'm quoting her again, Sharmila. When men and women from vulnerable castes and class are entering higher education for the first time, and those long considered unteachable are talking and writing back, this is the time in which we can really sort of rethink our pedagogy and the purpose of us, of higher education. In the essay, in which she actually lays out this Phule Ambedkarite feminist pedagogy, she writes of the sense of betrayal that students express when they find university teachers who may have written books about caste and gender, but are completely oblivious to how caste identities shape academic practices. To grasp the potential of the situation, faculty who are, and this is, I think, a proposal that I really would like to put forward here for discussion, is that, the fact that we faculty who are a privileged lot and who claim a commitment to critical scholarship and teaching have to give up our fear of identity and the masses and learn to appreciate, in Sharmila's words, the radical instability of the many languages of the subaltern citizens of mass democracy. A transformational politics would involve going beyond access to reconceptualize administrative and curricular practices in higher education in ways that recognize the histories of the hitherto excluded, that study how power works in the production, distribution, and consumption of knowledge, and that interrogate established cultures of teaching and learning. In these new times, we cannot practice inclusion, as business as usual, right, under the prevailing terms and conditions. That we really, this kind of inclusion that we've been doing in terms of just sort of saying, yes, let's create sort of space and access. This kind of inclusion is really failing us and leading to a disenchanted and demoralized student body. We need to acknowledge that access does not and cannot automatically mean enabling, and in fact can be quite its opposite. To overcome this paradox, we need a redefinition of the very terms of intellectual engagement that will require us to be historically grounded, and here I'm quoting Sharmila, in the contributions of the oppressed to create a democratic world, and in particular to take forward anti-caste feminist struggles, to restructure not just the classroom, but the academy. In her essay on Phule Ambedkarite feminist pedagogy, Sharmila Reddy is very careful to point out that in being historically situated and taking into account the experiences of the excluded majority in our classrooms and curricula, we must steer clear of the demand for a return to indigenous culture or the recovery of some authentic knowledge base. And I think in the last couple of months, we've really been seeing some of these demands resurfacing and really gathering force under the new dispensation. So she really sort of cautioned about sort of valorizing experience over theory and scientific inquiry. And she says this is only possible if we, sort of turn away from sort of, what post-colonial studies really has offered us towards a more Phule Ambedkarite feminist pedagogy, which is really very, which is rooted in very sort of materialist histories and materialist social, relations of power. In this endeavor, the field broadly labeled, and here I too sort of really second Sharmila's caution here, that in this endeavor, the field broadly labeled post-colonial studies has not been helpful, and indeed may have contributed to the problem. And I think what we see in a certain kind of Phule Ambedkarite feminist conceptual framework that Sharmila puts forward, that it offers us a way out of the regressive essentialist discourses that are blind to the patriarchal, Brahminical, and misogynist genealogies of non-Western knowledge claims. But I do want to kind of really sort of recover a certain strand of, I think, what I see as post-colonial scholarship, and here I really find Spivak Gayatri Spivak, who identifies herself as a Marxist feminist scholar, as an exception. Her mediations on the importance of the arts and the humanities for the contemporary world are instructive. In her latest book, An Aesthetic Education in the Age of Globalization, in her usual dense and I think somewhat sort of meandering way, but I think there's also really some real nuggets of insight there. But she makes a compelling case for how, in the final instance, an education in the arts and the humanities equips us with the skills and competencies to assess the ethical dimensions of the social world and to develop our intuitions for democracy. Skills and competencies that I think that we sorely need to challenge the current global capitalist economy that we're living under. It is only through such a deconstruction of the culture of pedagogy and the pedagogy of culture that it will be possible to transform higher education from a place of abjection to fulfilling its historic mandate as a site for training the ethical imagination. I want to stop. Thank you. I want to just put out actually a couple of citations and references, because there's very little sort of scholarship that's really kind of been done to kind of theorize some of this. And of course, Sharmila Regle is one of, I think, the precursor, who's been, I think, the first really academic here in the country who's really put a lot of time and effort and done some brilliant work. But there's a very new book, in fact, that's just come out. There's also a colleague who recently passed away, Usha Zakarias, and the Satish Deshpande from Delhi University. You'll find in this, for instance, also volume, there is a thing of saying, okay, we need to kind of go beyond the way in which access is often talked about and really interrogate our own practices and our own both pedagogical, curricular, and academic practices. And I think you'll find some really useful sort of leads in this current book, which I just had access to. Okay, thank you very much. I really like to.
Questions? Anyone have the mic here?
Questions and comments? Yes.
Madam, I have seen certain tribal areas in Madhya Pradesh and some Islam areas of Chhattisgarh. And what I have found that even though government has set up certain colleges for higher education, but even though number of colleges are setting up by the government and some private institutions are also coming up with their colleges, but this number of colleges and the increasing in the number of seats are failed to encourage the people from the backward communities and the backward castes to come and join the colleges and take up for the higher education. So, according to you, what would be the plans or strategy from the government side as well as to encourage the people for coming up this higher education?
You just want to take a couple of questions, or you want to? Okay.
This is an empirical question, I feel like an empiricist comment. Your slides 8 and 9 sort of showed that. And I found it interesting that if you go back to 8, it will also show 9. But if you look at the private unaided category and you look at the national average, it's 22% for private unaided universities and colleges. For OBCs, it is 15% more than that, which is even more than for others, leave alone for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe. Similarly, and the language background throws up another interesting statistic that between 1995 and 2007, language background Hindi there's virtually no change, 1%. English there's a 20% increase. The significant drop is from the speakers of other Indian languages. I wondered whether you could comment on both those points, especially slide number 8. I found that the OBC jump is 15% more than the national average. Now, nationally, I don't know what proportion are OBCs, because each state defines OBCs differently.
Right. We have.
And The reason that I'm asking this is that if you take other countries as a corollary, this you might say is analogous to the quote-unquote aspirational middle classes, how they behave in terms of going in for expensive, perhaps possibly instrumental education.
Yeah, can I just respond to that into both questions? I think again this OBC can be a really kind of again complex category. I mean, this is partly what we're really suffering from is lack of also really accurate data that really helps us to kind of see, for instance, really all of the different sort of shades of what the OBC comprises of or the SC comprises of. And I think here, for instance, and Balgopal sort of makes the point about there's also the provincial property class, can be there in the OBC category. And so you might have a certain kind of really mix in the OBC category that is also allowing a certain kind of access, which would be maybe rural and first generation, but may not have the same kind of other disadvantages around strictly speaking class. So it's really I find these categories and the boundaries also really kind of limiting to be doing this kind of analysis, is that they don't really tell us very accurately sort of what are the movement, the ways in which these categories might interconnect, right? That you might have first generation, to what extent you have rural and first generation, but not landless or classes or marginal farmers, from the poor, working poor category. We might, it's really kind of a, this is one of the things that we're going to be collecting the most precise data actually at Pune University to really figure out sort of, to what extent, for instance, the SC population is really rural and not urban that's coming into the state universities, right? And where are the urban SC populations really going? That when you just say SC, it doesn't necessarily mean, we can't sort of assume the same things about rural, first generation, urban, and all of those kinds of differences. Or vernacular medium versus English medium. And the same, I think, goes with the OBC. So that is one thing. I mean, the thing is that in terms of share in the population, it is very significant. So the OBC population. Right here, this is an older statistic, and yes, again, these are fuzzy statistics because state-wise, again, there's quite significant differences of who counts as OBC and who doesn't. And I think since Mandal 2, one could see that there's many more OBC students coming into accessing higher education. The question about what should be done to get them into colleges, are you saying that it's the students who are not willing to take admission, or is it that there's no encouragement from the institutions? Because I think the person sitting behind you. Yeah.
They are not willing to. I talk to many people, who belong to the people who sleep in the roads or the backward class communities. I visited to one of the travel blog in the Madhya Pradesh. There I found that the literacy means the people who have above graduate are hardly 1% in the whole blog. So, and when I talk to the people, they are not really willing to go to the higher education. Even though the educational institutions are there.
But this is exactly sort of, I think, the problem that I'm pointing out here is that the institutions themselves are sort of, really kind of alienating spaces. And so unless we also change the way in which institutions are responding to these different populations, or create a space for them, where they can sort of, in a sense, feel affirmed or validated, or sense a sense, have a sense of purpose, right? That they're not going to be coming in. So there is, it's something about also the change that we need in institutions, not simply in terms of sort of attitudes of people, or their resistance to education, right? Or that they don't value. In fact, I think for the longest time, in school education reports, you would see national reports and all of these NGO reports, you would see this kind of World Bank reports would constantly put out this kind of, I think, one of the biggest myths was about, oh, poor parents are not interested in sending their kids to school. And now, of course, there's a whole sort of they're taking back those assumptions and saying, no, actually, poor parents are, very, very interested in sending their kids to school, right? In fact, more than what, even private, investment in education and state investment can provide, can support. So this myth about sort of, that there's no interest on their part, it's really about sort of also the disconnection between the institutions and the people and their world, the worlds in which they inhabit and sort of the relevance for them.
One more question. I also come out from the poor background, but the number of colleges which has been, especially in engineering, so have done engineering, so the number of engineering college has been come in last 20 years, and this has also really encouraged the middle class people who earlier were not able to join the engineering college because of limited number of seats. Now the number of colleges have increased, so now they can take admission in the colleges. Yes, the quality of education as far as concerned has gone down, but the positive side is that the more number of people are now able to join the institution and are able to upgrade their life. So I want your comment on this. It's a paradox kind of thing that in one way number of people are taking admission in the college, they are able to upgrade their life, but the darker side is that the quality of education has gone down. Like you said that quality of education in IITs, because number of IITs are more, number of IIMs are more.
No, that's what I was pointing out was sort of the conservative viewpoint. It's not the viewpoint that I share, really. So it's not my viewpoint. I say that that's sort of the dominant perception that quality has gone down. All of my sort of really interactions and visits in state universities and shows that actually there's a lot of committed faculty. There's a lot of really, it's incredible to see that even in a context that is really very dispiriting, where there's a lot of, where they get a lot of brickbats for seeing that, they're not sort of, in a sense, performing up to standard, that they're really trying to serve and reach out to a population that's very, very underserved and that has a lot of different, complex kinds of demands. So I really don't see that the quality has gone down. It's really about sort of reorienting sort of, our own understanding of what should be the purpose of these institutions and how they need to kind of reorient themselves to serve this population in a more adequate manner. The competencies are there, the commitment is there. And of course, I think, on the other hand, yes, there is the other point, which I did not sort of, I wanted to sort of bring this up, I was hoping in the Q&A, in the Q&A is about sort of really that this student demographic has changed, but the faculty demographic has not changed in the same way. You're really seeing upper caste, urban, metropolitan, English-educated faculty like myself really very much still there, dominating in the public university system. And so I think there's a real disconnect between the faculty and the student body. And so a lot of it is about sort of, changing the attitudes of the faculty, the curriculum, the pedagogicals, what their sort of conventions that they're used to, that those need to be really rethought and, sort of examined. And that needs to be sort of a certain kind of a collective, collaborative project, right? It's not something that can be imposed top-down. And so that's part of, I think, the work that we need to do and to figure out what are the ways in which we can make that sort of collective, dialogical project of really getting faculty to be more self-reflexive, to be much more self-critical, and to rethink sort of their own modes of, instruction and teaching and, and syllabi and so on and so forth. So,
Ma'am, we recently heard that it's come in the news that our HRD ministry has proposed the coming up of a couple of new IITs, and we've seen a lot of protests within the IIT first improve the quality within, then expanding. So in this situation, I want your comment on what do you feel? I mean, should we go for quality or quantity? And in this situation, what applies?
I mean, I don't, that's sort of a Hobbesian sort of choice. There's not really a choice, because I think there is a lot of pressure, demand, for access. So people do want more institutions, but then you also find this whole thing about choice, markets sort of choice playing in, where you see students themselves will not take admission and will allow sort of seats to go vacant, right? And that's what's happening actually in Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra with engineering colleges. Engineering colleges are now they're trying to now reconvert them into sort of very swank sort of apartment complexes. And so the engineering college, CEOs are now becoming sort of real estate agents more, trying to kind of remarket that commodity. Because they're finding that yes, you have all these colleges, but then students know that okay, that degree has no value, there's no quality, there's no staff. Quality means that there's no teaching faculty, for instance, presentative, or they're not qualified, or they're just there, in very temporary kinds of ways, or there's no proper facilities, and so students themselves don't go. They don't, So if there's decline in quality, students themselves make a choice and actually don't even, you see the market sort of playing itself out in terms of demand and supply. So it's not so much like I don't think there is a choice there, and certainly it is about improving quality. But I think the question that I'm really trying to frame here is that what do we mean by quality? Are we saying quality in terms of certain kinds of international norms, of some kind of norms that are set or standards that are set by the US or by the World Bank? Or really, are we sort of really looking at what are the conditions, right? And what are the kinds of capacities and competencies and histories that people are coming into these universities, into higher education? And what are the ways in which we can create a meaningful education? And so it's, and I think IITs are anyway sort of, totally overestimated. And most of that, the student population of IITs, the graduates go abroad, right? So it's not, here I really want to sort of, us to sort of start paying attention to sort of the masses, right, of people, young people who are really trying to kind of access higher education. And it's really a minority elite that really is the ones that are going into the IITs. And they will find quality, they don't find it in a certain IIT, they'll find it somewhere else. So really, that's not really the, I think the really important concern there.
We have a question here, another question here. Anybody else? And then a question there. Go ahead.
I'm from Madhya Pradesh, underdeveloped district, tribal district, where in the government college, what I have seen that many of the students, more than half, I think 50% of students are not able to go regularly to the classes because of they have to go there somewhere for the job. So they are not coming regularly, but they have enrolled in BA or MA or something. So is there any problem in the system that we are not able to attract them or incentivize them to come to the college? And this kind of enrollment, if you are talking about enrollment, will lead to, will benefit those students because they are not coming, they are just coming to the classes and for the exams.
True. I mean, this is again a widespread phenomenon. This is the other thing that the research is showing, that actually this is happening across states, and it's happening in Maharashtra, it's happening in Pune University, which is seen as one of the top. So it doesn't have to be a backward district or anything, and I think you might see it sort of multiple times over. But it's happening in Hyderabad, in Osmania University, where you see there's a sizable proportion, sometimes even 60 or 70% of the class is really not attending. And they're out actually either working, but they're also preparing for competitive exams, right? And for them, it's really a way to kind of just maintain their access to the library, to really actually have affordable resources, right? An affordable place to stay when you're from a rural place, right? How do you live in the city and study for your competitive exams? How do you access a library? And so it's really about other kinds of gaps, really, or infrastructure gaps and gaps in sort of really the public services of education services that the state is providing. The students are finding other ways and means to try and sort of support themselves, right, through the process of exams and becoming qualifying for a job, etc. Sometimes they're there just looking for a job, but they're enrolled as students, right? And so there's all kinds of ways in which in fact administration refer to these students. That the universities become like a waiting room. Really, it's not really a place of education anymore. And so I think these are real serious issues that we're grappling with, where we shouldn't be displacing this as student that the students as sort of the source of the problem. There's something that's happening sort of structurally, right, that we need to kind of really have a policy response to. How do we create certain sort of services? So I think Pune University Vice Chancellor, and they're trying to respond to this issue in a different way and saying, okay, how do we sort of make sure we give them these services so they don't have to just take admission just to stay, have those ID cards to access the library. How do we give them, free access to the library? And so how do we form study groups or other kinds of support groups so that they can sort of figure out how to kind of get to these exams or go for job interviews, etc. And really not sort of, we shouldn't sort of make sort of students sort of the culprits, or that they are pulling down the quality. They're really finding a means to survive, and we really need to recognize it as such, really. And it's really part of the contradictions of the current economic scenario. Right? It's not that, you can get your BA degree or your graduate degree and you can get into the job market. There is no path there anymore. And so people are getting double and triple degrees in different kinds of sectors and fields. And so it's really this mismatch between education or the degrees and the employment market. And I think this mismatch is going to be there for a long time till we really, it's about, it's all the reasons, that go back to sort of the 2009 Wall Street crisis and the global economic crisis. And it's the crisis of global capitalism and jobless growth and speculative finance capital really generating wealth when you really don't need to create employment to generate wealth or to generate productivity. Right? So it's that is really the dilemma, which is a different economic question that shouldn't be displaced onto education or to students.
Question there.
We have a huge number of population who belongs to SC, ST and lower caste in India. So my question is that can you comment on the possibility of special schools and special colleges, special institutions, and audit for them? Anything of that?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that I think some of these conversations are beginning to happen, among sort of certain kinds of academic and policy circles about saying, just that, how the US had these historically black colleges in the US, should we be creating something similar here for, Dalit students, for ST students, and so forth. And the historically black colleges have shown really have shown some real significant impact in terms of being able to develop a certain kind of black intellectual class or a black sort of entrepreneurial class. But at the same time, again, it doesn't really these again sort of creating these islands. In a sense, it doesn't really build this kind of this kind of democratic space that we are really envisioning, right? Or where you can have a certain kind of interaction or certain kind of ways in which these different worlds and different groups of students really can learn from each other, right? And really live, coexist, rather than creating these kind of separate islands. And so it might also lead to, because already you have something like the quotas leading to a certain kind of stigmatization of students. And we don't know then again if those kinds of colleges are going to lead to certain kinds of ways in which they're stigmatized. I mean, maybe there is a way to do it, but again, it's not going to solve the problem, right? It's not going to solve what is a much more gigantic system-wide problem. But it might be one of the things that we could do.
A question here and then back there.
I'm hogging the microphone too much. But these two slides that you put up just now sort of strengthen the point that I was trying to make earlier. I think I made too many points earlier, which is sort of dilatory as far as for example, here, if you talked about the others, it's about 30%. Share of enrollment is nearly 48%. That means about 60% more than the population per se. Whereas OBCs, it's about 42%. Share of enrollment is about 35.45%. This slide here.
Yeah.
Number 7. But if you look at number 8, you will find that in the private unaided colleges, the OBCs are 25.55%, others are 21.93%, so they are less. Which means that many of the people, if not most of the people, who are increasingly going to these private colleges are not from the general category, but from the OBC. You made the very correct point that these OBCs are rather arbitrarily defined and that it varies quite a bit from state to state. For example, Reddis in Karnataka are considered OBCs. In Andhra, they're not. Absolutely arbitrary. I wonder whether there's something to be learned from this, especially with private unaided colleges growing in numbers and in terms of enrollment. Something else is happening. This is not as substantive as some of the points that were made earlier, but carrying on from what you said earlier, in Bangalore University there used to be an MA in Gandhian Studies. That's been discontinued. And the reason it's been discontinued is because people who are applying for that program, apparently, I'm not sure if this is true, were joining the program because they wanted to get into the hostel. And they were using the hostel for other purposes, whether looking for a job or while working or preparing for a competitive exam or something else. So if anyone wants to learn about Gandhi today in the city, it's not possible to do so unless you do it on your own.
Shall we take 3 more questions and pick it together, or you want to go again?
No. I think, there is a longer discussion to be had there in terms of the OBCs. I mean, I think that the Reddis are a good example, right? Because they would really fit into this kind of provincial property class that K. Balagopal talks about. But they are OBC in one state and not in another. But I do think that Azim really impacts this statistic.
Yeah.
Hello ma'am. There must be some entry barrier for this private unaided colleges, right? But still they are growing like a mushroom and declining the quality of the education. So I just wanted to know a few reflection of yours if you have come across why the system is so loosely coupled that it's still making the entry barrier so weak, making the entry barrier for these colleges.
I mean, the private unaided, again, we can't say, across the board that, they're the ones who are weakening the quality. I mean, there's so much unevenness in the sector. And so you have certain kinds of, private unaided which are seen as really sort of, very excellent institutions. I mean, I think Manipal is one of the oldest, right? University is one of them. But and I don't think there's something weak, there's weakening of admission barriers there.
Colleges like, ma'am, I've seen not many MBA colleges in Mumbai, in every nook and corner, opening in a building or maybe in a room. So, a few reactions in that.
Right. I mean, that's part of sort of, really education, and this is sort of the research sort of that I've been doing in Andhra, is education becoming really, another market, for investment and really a highly profitable market, right? With a very, very sort of ready clientele, given that we have a huge youth demographic, right? We have sort of really 70% of the population of the country really under 35, and so you really have, I mean, entrepreneurs and investors are also recognizing, yes, this is a very profitable market, and so there is a setting up, and this sheer money being made and profits are huge. And the students are getting the kind of degree, I mean, so in a sense it's also about, there's a market for degrees, it's not so much, about, the concern is not really about education per se. And so there's a different logic that's playing, that's the logic of capital. And this is what, a lot of sort of, yes, educationists, the left, this is really, the issue that they're taking up, that, you're commodifying education, you're making it like any other commodity that you can go purchase, whoever has the money. And, in the long run, that this is going to create, really negative, repercussions. But, that's really neither here or there. I mean, in a sense, part of it is that these degrees have a certain kind of value often, because as long as your BA you might get from a top-notch university, you might get from an excellent university like Pune University is excellent, and you might get a BA or a women's studies degree from there, but it still will not be as competitive in the job market as your MBA from something that somebody said. So it's just that that degree and what it sort of stands for, but it may have no substance. Really. So it's really exchange value and not use value anymore.
A question here, one there, and up in front.
Yeah. Question here. I was just wondering, just drawing our attention to one of the factors that makes higher education such an alienating space, namely English, the language and all that it implies. In the last few decades, English has proved to be a very attractive option for many disadvantaged groups, also because it seems to bypass linguistic hierarchies within these languages. So Dalit writers in Marathi, in Telugu, in Kannada, or elsewhere, find English a way of bypassing linguistic hierarchies already entrenched in their own languages. That offers writers like Kancha Ilaya or Chandrabhan Prasad arguments to promote English as the panacea, the English goddess, Chandrabhan Prasad calls it, to leapfrog entrenched hierarchies. However, as you know, this is a completely illusory promise, certainly on a mass scale. And we know the results of what happens with a one-room MBA where English medium education is being offered. The products, the students who pass out, who are products really, are more or less unemployable. For mostly they need a lot of hand-holding to be able to bring them up to speed. I was wondering if you had any thoughts to offer at all on language policy in higher education.
Just a question here. Varsity has been having her hand up for a while.
I think what the question what Sir was making was, while he was comparing 25.55 of the OBC and 21.93, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's not the comparison across the OBC and others. Actually, the sum total is the vertical and not the horizontal. It's vertical. It's written.
Yeah, but whether you do it this way or that,
I did the calculation. It was like.
No, there is a different table for the horizontal sum that actually shows this is different. I didn't want to load you on with a lot of the data points, but I do have that, and you can compare that.
Okay, so the English question here, shall we get Baruni's
Baruni,
question?
yes, please, yeah. Baruni is here.
Okay, so underlying much of your talk is really the crisis of humanities in higher education, right? And that's, I think, that's what you're saying, but not quite saying as well. Now, I have 2 or 3 related sort of queries about it. One is, what is your take on, let's say, the student movements in universities right now? one thing that strikes us, these are all central universities, these are all elite institutions within public university systems. So I'm particularly thinking about Delhi University and its long-standing face-off within certain departments with the administration of Delhi University, and more recently what's happening in Pune University, for instance. Do you see that as kind of hope for the future, or is it just something that's going to happen and then go away and happen and go away? The other thing that I'm interested in is to have you talk a little bit more about professional colleges and research, spaces for research. And if we can lead to much of your categories, not simply in terms of state or private, or within the state university system, central universities and private, and within the public universities, state and central universities. If we think of these in terms of degree granting or professional degree granting institutions and research institutions, what is the kind of it? I mean, do you see hope for you? I guess is my question.
No, I mean, if I didn't see hope, I wouldn't be doing this work. So, and I feel like this does offer sort of, this is sort of really a resource, to build the future. These sites are the places where we can build, a different and envision a different kind of future. I do feel that the resources are there for that, and so that's part of why this work is happening. But your first question was about the humanities, and I also want to talk about the language question, which I think is really very much. I think that is sort of like the burning question, in fact, that one sees in the state universities, both central and state-administered institutions. That so much of the caste, rural-urban divide, the class question, all actually dovetails and gets framed and articulated as the language question. And sort of really saying, okay, how do we find our way out of that problem? Because it really doesn't seem like there's any sort of clean, neat way out of that problem. And I think that there's a real story here to be written about sort of the ways in which faculty in these institutions are grappling with this issue. On a day-to-day basis, they have to grapple with an issue in their classrooms, in the advising they do, in the thesis writing that they're directing. And it's really remarkable, to see the kinds of strategies that faculty are coming up with, to really, where there's not a straightforward panacea like, what Chandrabal Prasad Put says, let's make English, the goddess, and really sort of, have English as sort of the medium of instruction. What I find actually faculty in many of these state universities are doing is that they also simultaneously carry on classes in the vernacular medium, right? So they take extra classes, and there's so much of this labor that's really unrecognized. Or they prepare notes, notes that really translate a lot of the curriculum, the text, the theory in the vernacular with examples. And I mean, what's really remarkable is I would encourage you all to just look at sort of the resources, for instance, that Shamila Regi, under her directorship at the center, produced along with students and colleagues, where they would produce these books that were written on whether it's about feminist theory, around youth culture, around development studies, that would be where students are also part of the writing process, and they're writing, and they would have sort of Marathi interspersed with the English, right? Or certain things would be explained in Marathi because there's a certain resonance. And so it wasn't that saying that, okay, we shouldn't make it sort of it's only this or that. And how do we sort of really make it, that there's a certain kind of way in which students are inhabiting this as a common universe, both of these languages. And they do want mastery, of course, of English. But at the same time, that they come in with certain kinds of strengths and a certain way in which there's thinking process that's also very complex, and the way in which they express certain things which are more evocative. And how do we not lose that as well, right? And so there's a way in which they're trying to sort of do this as in some kind of a simultaneous way. And I think these are the kinds of efforts that we really need to kind of maybe there's a way to incentivize this, right? Whereas UGC is going in the opposite direction. The kinds of reforms that UGC is proposing is really to say, okay, you're going to, a faculty member in these state universities will be rewarded if they publish in, a journal that's, sort of seen as top ranked in, one of these international indexes, right? The Social Science Research Index or what, and not really looking at sort of these kinds of resources which really do respond and answer to the needs of students so much more, in a much better fashion. And at the same time also, the hard work that is involved in this, right? Which is really a labor of love. Nobody is giving them any awards for it, nobody's recognizing them, and they're not getting any, remuneration for it. And so, I think we need to figure out how to kind of really reward those kinds of, that kind of academic labor, rather than sort of just matching to international sort of norms and standards. And I think that's the big mistake we're making, really, in undermining these kinds of efforts. Is the UGC reforms are really going about undermining these kinds of efforts that have been in existence for quite a while. I think we wouldn't see graduates out of these universities and some, the quality work that does come out, fairly on some kind of consistent basis out of these universities, whether it's, MS University in Baroda, or it's, it's in Pune, or it's in, Nagpur, or, Hyderabad, etc. That I don't think you would see this consistence with some kind of good quality work, academic or scholarly work come if it weren't for some of this kind of work and inputs that are going on for a while. So it's like, how do we make this more system-wide? So it's not just faculty doing it on their voluntary basis, out of their own personal commitment, but something that's really more programmatic policy. So, I think it's a crisis of the humanities most seriously, but it's also really something that one's seeing in the social science and the pure sciences. It's not, I can't say that it's only a crisis of the humanities, but I think it's most acutely made manifest in the humanities at present.
So we'll take a last round of couple questions and we'll start wrapping up, shall we? Okay, here's one gentleman. Anybody else?
Good afternoon, ma'am. During the presentation, you had given a statement that the left has some kind of difficulty in understanding the predicament of students. So apart from that, the percentage of private sector is increasing, especially in higher education. And the definition of quality and skill are getting refined as we move forward. So my question will be, how far the left is right in raising their voice against neoliberalism in education, even if they don't come up with a solution?
Totally, I think that there is an important struggle and opposition to be mounted there, certainly. And I've definitely been one of the persons who's also been writing on this for some time. But I think I feel like there's also certain kinds of we're wearing certain blinders, and there's a certain kind of limitation in sort of just that kind of singular focus. And I think we're really missing out on being able to mobilize certain other kinds of opportunities and resources that are now available, or the conditions that are right for doing certain other kinds of work that will actually be, will lead us on the path of sort of, doing much more sort of, critical work or oppositional work to neoliberalism. It doesn't have to be sort of, there's neoliberalism and economic issues, and then there are these other social issues of students. It's like, how do we kind of really bring them into connection? How do we sort of properly sort of connect those what are seen as particularistic or identity-based kinds of struggles with these larger macroeconomic issues? And I think that work is really important if we want to make any movement forward in the struggle against neoliberalism. So I'm very much committed and wedded to the struggle against neoliberalism.
So left
but we're
could
not
be
going
right
to get
sometimes.
there in this, there's no shortcut to it.
Yeah, next. And then
Actually, much of what you said addresses the kind of question I had, but one thing I just wanted to point out, and this relates back to what you were saying and also the previous comment, is that English is often another name for practice. and where you want to insert yourself in the capitalist labor process, right? So if you want to extricate yourself from the most exploitative, surplus extracting modes of labor enacted in this process, then English is a way out and inserting yourself, however illusory it might, in terms of surplus extracted, or however intellectuals and critics understand that. There is no denying that there is a real appeal to the person who wants to extricate himself or herself from bottom rung and insert himself or herself again in a different place in the labor process. On the one hand is this, the other hand is the lament of the left that all kinds of working class politics have been kind of dissolved into identitarian politics, and between these two poles there seems to be a huge chasm. Which, I mean, yeah, that's the kind of crisis I guess you're signaling towards. And I was also curious about your analogy of the US experience and the black colleges and stuff like that. And that was also precisely, and there were many different, of course, ideologies, you know this very well, kind of propelling this. If you have to put names to it, then Booker T. Washington's idea of Tuskegee Polytechnic College, again, was to insert the black population into the capitalist labor process from slavery, making the transition into capitalism. Yeah, so I mean, how do you encounter, or how do you really pose a robust answer back to people like Chandrabal Prasad or Kanche Elaya of the latest incarnations, who make this point very seriously and which has a wide kind of acceptance within the Dalit population? They take it seriously. As much as critics on the left, we find it, there are many problems one can locate with that kind of argumentation. Of capital being the liberatory force and English being the other side of it.
At some point, in some ways I feel like, we're kind of sort of paying the price, on the left, for really ignoring the caste question for way too long, right? And so you do have then a certain kind of, I think, much more limiting, regressive sort of, Dalit sort of leadership sort of that's emerging, that's sort of posing these kinds of, quick sort of, these kinds of solutions are very, very appealing. Yes, but I won't say that this is something that's sort of, that they've, won over the Dalit population or the Dalit youth with these kinds of proposals. And there's a very serious sort of internal sort of actual critique that we don't often see out in the public. That there's a way in which it has sort of also fragmented sort of the Dalit politics itself, and they themselves are really trying to find a way in which they can sort of present a new kind of envision and put forward and articulate sort of really a new way in which to take sort of this kind of social justice politics forward that eschews sort of the Chandrabal Prasad kind of proposals. But we don't really see that out, put out in sort of the media, and it doesn't come out in the public. So that's where I feel like here we do have sort of a responsibility and a task for the left to really kind of form new kinds of alliances within the Dalit intellectual class. That they're not the only sort of spokesperson people. But this is where I feel like we are shooting ourselves in the foot when we don't recognize that, and we sort of ignore sort of some of those potentials, and we're really sort of giving, conceding the ground even before it's really been fought over.
Himanshu.
Yeah, did you ask that question? I had a footnote, so I started that. Although in certain discussions we try to see that these are the voices that are articulating this kind of issues and understanding. But if one look at the entire range of Dalit writing in India, there is a lot of Dalit poetry that happens even today in Gujarati, in Marathi, in Telugu. And it's not that they have not articulated the critique of standardization project that has happened in these languages and has not articulated a critique of it, but they are still using the same language to again articulate the critique of the normativity that starts getting built around the standardization process and things like that. Having said that, the question that I had for you was that if you look at the same sort of crisis that Varun is articulating as crisis of humanities, as crisis of within higher education, what is happening to teacher education space, and how the neoliberal plethora of new private unaided institutions and things like that, would that then lead you to what you were slightly referring to but did not elaborate on, where you said that at the level of students and entry we now have a lot of diversity, but at the level of faculty we still don't have that diversity represented?
I mean, I think your question was more like a comment. I mean, I agree with, yes, we do see the diversity in the student body, but not in the faculty. So I don't know if there's an answer there that I have for you. Because if you can repeat what your question was, but I think I agree with your comment that you made, your observation.
Within the teacher education space,
Right.
you have how this process of
I mean, I think, teacher education again was one of those early sort of, strands of this kind of professional preparation or professional degrees, right? Practitioner degrees. And you really saw a certain kind of, again, segment of students going in for those kinds of practitioner degrees. And again, seen as very sort of low value, not like the MBAs and the pharmacy, so it's, it's in a very different category as a professional degree. And so you did see, a lot of sort of really, what we would see kind of as a certain kind of lower middle class or a middle class that's going in for the teacher preparation degrees. And I mean, I can't see that there's anything sort of distinctive or separate or unique about it that's happening. What's come to my attention now is, with the BJP in power, that's one of the first areas where they're really redoing the curriculum, is the teacher education programs. And so they're going much more in this sort of direction of sort of, the communalization of more sort of Hindutva. So it's like, the Bhagavad Gita, sort of the required sort of text on which students are going to be, student teachers are going to be tested, right? And so we're going to see that kind of sort of, move happening. Of this kind of indigenizing teacher education, which is not, the same what's happening in these other sectors of, the commercialization of commodities. And in terms of, caste composition, I think it is, pretty diverse, teacher education, because it's one of those things where yes, you can have a guaranteed job at the end, but again from a lower class fraction.
All right, thank you so much, Sangeeta, Kamat. And we can continue our discussions after this. Thank you.